The station hummed quietly in the darkness of space, its lights flickering intermittently, as if to match the uneasy mood of its inhabitants. On board, a deadly assassin moved through the shadows with the stealth of a predator on the hunt. Cloaked in the shimmering fabric of her advanced technology, she silently glided through the dark, sterile hallways of the space station, her every step calculated and precise. Her name was Skara, an alien from a distant world known for her cold-blooded efficiency and unmatched skills in elimination. She had been trained from an early age to kill without hesitation, to remove anything or anyone that stood in the way of her people's objectives. Humans, in her experience, were nothing more than a nuisance, weak and easily defeated by superior technology and tactics. They were barely worth the effort, but this mission was different. Sarah had been sent to eliminate a human leader, someone who had been stirring up resistance in the outer colonies. The mission was straightforward: find the target, kill him, and leave without a trace. But as she moved deeper into the heart of the colony, something unsettled her. The air felt thicker, the hum of the station more oppressive, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of doubt. It wasn't long before Xara stumbled upon a small group of humans, hiding in a makeshift shelter. The group was clearly outmatched. They were weak, ragged, and surrounded by the advanced alien forces who had been sent to crush them. The odds were overwhelmingly against them. And yet, they showed no fear. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces marked by exhaustion, but there was a glimmer of something else in their eyes, a fierce determination. Sarah watched from the shadows, her heart racing as she observed them. Humans were supposed to be weak, easy targets. They weren't meant to fight back, at least not in the way she was seeing now. Her entire life, she had been taught to view humans as little more than insects to be crushed underfoot. But this group, they were different. They weren't running. They weren't begging for mercy. They weren't even fighting in the way she expected them to. Instead, they were planning. They were strategizing. One human in particular caught her attention. A young man, no more than 20, with eyes that burned with something deep and unyielding. He stood in the center of the group, speaking with a calm that was almost unnatural. The others listened to him, hanging on every word. And for a moment, Sarah found herself mesmerized by the sheer confidence in his voice. "Don't lose hope," he said. "We may be outnumbered, but we're not out of the fight. We stand, or we fall together, but we won't go down without a battle. This station isn't just a base. It's our home, and we'll defend it with everything we have." His words weren't the desperate cries of someone trying to rally the troops. They were the words of someone who truly believed they could win. Even with the odds stacked against them, he had a fire in him that Sarah hadn't seen before. He wasn't afraid of death. No, he seemed to embrace it, as though he had already made peace with the fact that he might not make it out alive. Yet, his resolve never wavered. Sarah couldn't help but feel a strange tug in her chest. What was it about this human that made him so different? He wasn't like the others she had encountered. He wasn't pleading for mercy, and he certainly wasn't running for his life. In fact, he seemed eager to face the danger head-on, as if he wanted the fight, needed it, and that made Sarah hesitate. Why did he seem so powerful? Zara's mind raced as she stood silently in the shadows, watching him. She knew she had a mission to complete, that she had to kill him and get it over with. But the more she watched him, the more she began to question the mission itself. She had killed countless humans before. Tall, short, old, young, all of them with their own unique stories. But this one human was different. He was the first human who had made her feel uneasy, the first to make her question the very thing she had been trained to do. Could it be that this human wasn't the weakling she had been told to expect? Was he somehow different from all the others? It was as if the simple act of watching him was making her rethink everything she had been taught about humans. The young man's voice broke through her thoughts. "We don't need weapons to win," he said. "We just need the will to fight." That's what makes us dangerous. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. She had always seen herself as superior, an assassin, an expert in death. Her alien race had technology far beyond anything humans could dream of. She was powerful, and she knew it. Yet in this moment, she felt something she hadn't expected. Uncertainty. Was this human right? Did they truly have something she had never considered? The will to fight. Was that what made them dangerous? What made them? So much more than what she had imagined. Her hand hovered near the weapon at her side, ready to pull the trigger at a moment's notice. But she didn't move. Not yet. For some reason, she couldn't bring herself to act. She just watched as the young man continued to speak to his group, inspiring them, keeping their spirits high in the face of certain doom. The more she watched, the more the doubt grew. She had always thought of humans as weak and fragile, but now she wasn't so sure. There was something about their spirit, about this one human, that made her think that maybe, just maybe, she had underestimated them all. Should she go through with the mission? Should she kill him? Or was there something else at play here, something she had yet to understand? Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The once clear path ahead of her now seemed clouded, uncertain. For the first time in her life, she found herself questioning her own instincts. Should she finish the job, or should she listen to this strange feeling in her gut that told her this human was different from all the others? Sarah's heart pounded as she moved deeper into the corridors, her footsteps silent and calculated. She could feel the tension in the air, the sharpness of the moment, as she moved toward her target. The young human leader had eluded her for too long, but now she was sure he had nowhere left to run. This time, she would finish the mission. Her mind was made up. She had done this countless times before, and the outcome was always the same. This human would fall like all the others. Her cloaking device shimmered, flickering in and out of view as she silently stalked him. It was a simple system, advanced technology that allowed her to become nearly invisible, to move through shadows undetected. It had always worked in the past, but this time, something felt off. Sarah paused, peering around the corner. The human leader was standing alone, facing the wall, his back to her. He didn't appear to be aware of her presence, and yet Sarah's instincts told her that something wasn't right. She had been trained to spot even the faintest hint of danger, and she sensed it now. The human wasn't acting like a typical target. He wasn't cowering, he wasn't frantic, he wasn't even afraid. He was waiting. Sarah took a step closer, the quiet hum of her cloaking device echoing in her ears. As she stepped into his line of sight, her device flickered again, briefly revealing her outline. The human turned to face her in an instant, his eyes locking with hers. For the briefest moment, Sarah was stunned. His eyes were calm, determined. There was no fear in them, no hint of surprise. He wasn't frightened of her. "Don't waste my time," the human said, his voice firm but not raised. "I know you're there, and I know why you're here." Sarah froze, her hand instinctively tightening around the hilt of her weapon. How had he known? Her cloak was supposed to make her invisible, silent. Yet here he was, standing as though he had been expecting her. There was no panic in his expression, only quiet resolve. "You don't understand, do you?" the human continued, his gaze unwavering. "Humans never stop. Even when we're outmatched, we fight with everything we have. We don't know how to quit." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process his words. She had heard similar phrases before, but something about this one hit differently. She had always been taught to believe that humans were weak, that they lacked the strength to resist their superior forces. But this human, this one, was not afraid. And the words he spoke, the conviction in his voice, unsettled her. "Is that what you think?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the doubt that was beginning to creep in. "That you're somehow special, that you can survive simply because you refuse to give up?" The human leader didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, his chest rising and falling steadily with every breath. "It's not about being special," he said. It's about the will to survive. Our will is stronger than anything you've ever faced. You can crush us, kill us, but you'll never break us. We rise again, always." Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding as his words washed over her. She had always seen humans as nothing more than pests, creatures to be exterminated without thought. But this human was different. He spoke of wars humanity had fought, battles they had lost, but always they had come back. They had never stopped. They had never given up. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, they fought on. Sarah felt something stir within her, something she had never felt before. It was as if the walls she had carefully constructed around her mind began to crack, slowly but surely. The truth of the human leader's words seeped into her, unsettling her, making her question everything she had been taught. "You think we're weak," the human said, his voice low but fierce. "You think we're fragile, that we're just going to fall and stay down. But that's not who we are. You don't get it, do you? Our strength isn't in our bodies or our weapons. It's in our will, in our spirit. And that's something you can't destroy." Sarah's mind spun as she absorbed his words. Could it be true? Was it possible that these humans, whom she had so easily dismissed as inferior, had something that made them stronger than her kind had ever imagined? She had always relied on her skills, her advanced technology, and her superiority to crush her enemies. But here, in front of her, was a human who was not only unafraid, but who seemed to possess something far more dangerous than technology. The human leader took another step forward, his posture unwavering. "I'm not afraid to die," he said, his voice firm. "But I will fight until the very end, and I will make sure that you understand just why humanity is not to be underestimated." For the first time in her life, Sarah felt a flicker of uncertainty. The human's words dug deep into her core, making her question everything she had believed about her mission and about the humans she had been sent to eliminate. He was right. She had been trained to kill, to destroy, to think of herself as invincible. But this human had something that made her hesitate, a belief, a willpower, something far stronger than anything she had ever encountered. As she stood there, locked in a silent battle with her own thoughts, Sarah realized something. She didn't know how to respond. For the first time, she didn't have the answers. She had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the terms of the fight. But now, facing this human, she found herself unsure of what to do next. The human leader smiled slightly, as if he could see the turmoil in her mind. "You came here to kill me," he said softly. "But you don't understand. We don't die easily. We'll keep fighting, no matter what. We'll keep pushing forward." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The words rang true. Humanity's resilience, their refusal to give up, was something she had never understood until this moment. They were not the weak, helpless creatures she had always thought them to be. They were something else entirely. Her mind raced, torn between the mission and the strange sense of respect that was beginning to grow within her. Could she really go through with it? Could she kill a human who was so filled with strength, with willpower? The silence between them stretched on, thick with the weight of her decision. Sarah knew one thing for certain. Her mission was no longer just about completing a task. It was about something much more personal. Something had changed inside her. And as she looked into the human leader's eyes, she realized that the battle she faced now was not just against him, but against everything she had ever believed about her own kind. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes locked on the human leader as he gave orders to his troops. His voice was calm yet firm, full of authority and conviction. The way he spoke, the way his soldiers listened and followed him, it was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen before. The humans weren't cowering in fear. They weren't begging for their lives. They were standing tall, united, as if they had known their fate from the beginning. And yet they were still ready to fight, ready to stand together against whatever force came their way. Her heart seemed to pound in a way she had never felt before. She had seen countless armies, countless forces, and she had been a part of many missions. She had seen fear. She had seen submission. But here, now, there was none of that. There was only strength, a strength that Xara could not deny. The human leader moved among his men, speaking to each of them as though they were family. He didn't shout orders. He didn't demand obedience. Instead, he spoke to them with a kind of quiet confidence that made them look up to him, trust him, and follow him without question. The assassin had always been alone. She had never experienced the bonds these humans shared. She had always been taught that emotions like loyalty and love were weaknesses, something that could be exploited, something to avoid. But now, she felt something stir deep within her. What was this feeling? Was it envy? Xara watched as the human leader gently clapped one of his soldiers on the back, his words too quiet to be heard, but the warmth in his smile said enough. The soldier smiled back, and for a moment, Xara saw something that struck her to her core. Trust. True, unshakable trust between these humans. They didn't follow him out of fear. They followed him because they believed in him. They believed in each other. She had never known this kind of connection. She had never been a part of a team, a family. It had always been about the mission, about the kill, about the next assignment. There was no room for anything else. She was trained to be ruthless, cold, detached. But watching the human leader interact with his men, she began to wonder, could humans truly be as weak as the galaxy believed them to be? Could these bonds of loyalty, of love, really make them that much stronger? Xara couldn't stop herself from observing. She was no longer focused solely on the mission. The human leader's words, his actions, they had pierced something deep inside her. She had always believed that humans were inferior, but now she wasn't so sure. Her thoughts twisted and turned. If they were so weak, so inferior, why did they fight so hard? Why did they stand against everything that tried to break them? Was this just a fluke, or was there something far more powerful at work? She shook her head. No, she couldn't allow herself to get distracted. Her mission was clear. She had a job to do. She was an assassin, and her target was still alive. That was all that mattered. But as she watched the human leader, her resolve wavered. She couldn't deny what she had seen. The way his soldiers trusted him, the way they fought not out of fear, but because they believed in their cause, it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Xara's internal conflict grew stronger by the second. The mission was supposed to be simple. It was supposed to be clean, in and out, no questions asked. But now, nothing seemed clear. The humans had fought against impossible odds before, and they had survived. They had shown time and again that they could endure. As the sound of explosions echoed through the station, Xara's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden screech of metal being torn apart. The walls of the station shook violently, and the lights flickered. The human leader's soldiers scrambled into action, their movements swift and precise, ready to defend their comrades. Xara's eyes widened. The alien forces had launched an orbital bombardment. The station was under attack, and the humans were caught in the crossfire. She saw the human leader issue orders, his voice calm despite the chaos. He moved quickly, directing his men to take cover, to protect each other. Xara's instincts kicked in. She had to act. Her mind flashed back to her mission, to eliminate the human leader. But now, as the bombardment intensified, her eyes darted around the room. The human leader wasn't focused on her. He was focused on his men, ensuring their safety, making sure they survived. As another explosion rocked the station, Xara felt the ground beneath her shake. Debris rained down from above, and she was forced to duck, narrowly avoiding being crushed by a falling beam. She was thrown off balance, her cloaking device malfunctioning in the chaos. The lights went out completely for a moment, leaving the station bathed in darkness and flashing emergency lights. In the midst of the chaos, she found herself standing beside the human leader. For the first time, she was forced to confront him directly, not as an assassin and her target, but as two beings caught in the same situation. The human leader glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You're still here?" he asked, his voice a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Don't you have a job to do?" Sarah felt a strange tightening in her chest. She should have attacked. She should have finished her mission. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. There was something about him, something about the way he acted, the way he cared for his people, that made her hesitate. The human leader didn't wait for her response. Instead, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a nearby doorway. "We need to get to cover now," he shouted over the roar of explosions. Sarah was momentarily stunned. She was an assassin, a killer. She was trained to be the one in control, to be the one giving orders, not following them. And yet here she was, being led by a human who didn't see her as a threat, but as someone to protect, someone to work with. She resisted the urge to pull away. She was an assassin, not a soldier. But in this moment, she realized that the difference between the two was not as clear-cut as she had always believed. The human leader was fighting for his people, just as she had always fought for her mission. But now, she wasn't sure if she was still on the side she had always known. The two of them took cover as another barrage of explosions shook the station. Sarah's heart raced, but it wasn't just from the danger around her. It was from the realization that she had just witnessed something extraordinary. Humans, despite being outnumbered, despite being surrounded by far superior technology, were still fighting. They were still standing, still pushing forward. And it wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting each other. It was about loyalty, love, and resilience. As the battle continued, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, if she chose to fight with them, if she chose to stand by their side, what would that make her? Would she be the assassin she had always been, or would she become something more, something stronger? For the first time in her life, Sarah was faced with a question she couldn't answer. The space station trembled again as another round of bombardment shook its very foundations. Sarah could hear the faint hiss of energy blasts echoing through the corridors, followed by the deafening crash of metal against metal. Her cloaking device flickered, making it harder to blend into the darkness, but she knew she had to keep moving. The alien forces were closing in, and time was running out. She glanced over at the human leader, his face set in grim determination. He was always one step ahead, directing his men with sharp orders and precise movements. He was more than just a leader. He was the core of the human resistance, and Sarah could see why they'd followed him so willingly. His confidence was infectious, and his belief in his people never wavered, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Together, they moved through the station's dark corridors, the sound of their footsteps muted by the chaos around them. Sarah's enhanced senses were on high alert, and she was hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. The humans, however, seemed almost unfazed. They moved as if they had practiced this countless times, their actions coordinated and efficient. She had always believed humans to be weak, outmatched by the superior alien technology and forces surrounding them. But now, watching them in action, she wasn't so sure. She was beginning to see them in a new light. Every step they took, every life they sacrificed, only seemed to fuel their determination to survive. They didn't rely on cloaking technology or advanced weapons. They relied on each other. That was what made them dangerous. That was what had made Sarah hesitate earlier. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden explosion. The blast sent them both tumbling to the ground, and the once solid floor beneath them cracked and buckled. Sarah's cloaking device flickered again, and she could see the human leader struggling to rise. Blood stained his uniform, and his face was twisted in pain. He reached out for his weapon, but his hand trembled, his strength clearly fading. "No," Sarah muttered under her breath, her heart racing as she saw him struggle. "Not now." She rushed to his side, her instincts telling her to help him. But she hesitated. She had been trained to eliminate her target, not to save them. And yet, here she was, looking down at the human leader who had shown her more than just strength. He had shown her what it meant to fight for something greater than oneself. "You can't keep going," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly gentle for someone who had spent years training to kill. She knelt beside him, her fingers brushing against the wound on his side. "You need help." He gritted his teeth, trying to push her away. "No time," he muttered. "We can't stop now. We have to keep moving." The others. Sarah looked at him, the man who had led his people with unwavering determination. His men were still fighting, still holding their ground. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes, those eyes, spoke volumes. They spoke of someone who had seen war, who had experienced loss, but who still believed in the fight, still believed in the cause. And in that moment, Sarah understood something she hadn't before. She understood that this wasn't just about survival. This wasn't just about completing her mission. This was about making a choice. She glanced at the enemy forces closing in from both sides. She could still feel the weight of her mission pressing down on her, telling her to finish the job. But as she watched the human leader, his eyes filled with pain and yet still burning with determination, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more important than the mission. Something more important than killing him. She clenched her fists, her mind spinning. Should she finish what she had started? Should she end this man's life and complete her mission? Or should she help him? Help him escape and possibly change the course of the war? Sarah's breath quickened. She knew what was at stake. If she helped him, she would be turning her back on everything she had ever known, everything she had been trained to do. She would be putting herself at risk, risk of failure, risk of her superiors turning on her. But in the moment that their eyes met, she saw something she couldn't ignore. A bond, a connection that transcended the mission. It wasn't just about her duty anymore. It was about a choice between saving a life or taking it. She couldn't deny it anymore. For the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to be the assassin. She wasn't sure she wanted to follow orders. The world she had known, the cold, heartless world of training and killing, seemed so distant now. In its place was a new understanding, one that made her heart ache with the realization that humans, these weak creatures, had something she had never experienced, a reason to live. The sound of more explosions brought Sarah back to the present. The alien forces were closing in, and time was running out. She could hear the whirring of enemy weapons, the sound of soldiers shouting orders. There was no more time for hesitation. She had to make a choice. Her gaze fell on the human leader, and in that moment, she made her decision. "Hang on," she said softly, her voice full of conviction. "I'm not leaving you behind." With surprising strength, Sarah lifted him into her arms, ignoring the pain that surged through her body as she moved. She could feel the weight of his bloodied form pressing against her, but she didn't care. She was no longer an assassin. She was a protector. And for the first time, she felt what it was like to fight for something bigger than herself. The two of them moved through the chaos, the humans fighting valiantly behind them as they created a path to escape. Zara's cloaking device flickered as she activated it once more, but this time, it wasn't to hide. It was to protect. She moved with precision, weaving through enemy fire and debris, using her skills to shield them from the oncoming storm of violence. The human leader was still breathing, though shallowly, and Sarah's heart raced as she ducked and dodged, barely managing to keep him alive. As they neared the station's emergency escape pods, Sarah knew they couldn't keep going much longer. The station was falling apart around them, and they were running out of time. They had to escape. With one final, desperate push, Sarah made it to the pod and threw the hatch open. She helped the human leader inside, and as the door sealed, she turned back to the chaos. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice. The pod shot away from the station, and Sarah watched as the station exploded in the distance, flames and debris scattering in all directions. She felt a strange sense of peace wash over her as she looked at the human leader, who was now unconscious but alive. The war wasn't over. The battle was still raging. but for the first time in her life. Shara knew she had made the right choice. She had chosen to fight for something greater than herself, something more than just an assassin's mission. She had chosen to fight for humanity. And as she looked out at the stars, she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The escape pod was speeding through space, and Xara's heart was still pounding in her chest. The station was a blur in the distance, its glowing fragments slowly disappearing into the darkness of space. It was hard to comprehend what had just happened. She had been sent to eliminate the human leader. She had been trained for years to be cold, efficient, and ruthless, but now everything felt different. The human leader shifted beside her, wincing from the pain. "You don't have to keep saving me," he said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the blood still dripping from his wounds. "But I'll never forget what you've done." Xara looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You shouldn't trust me," she said, her tone cold despite the warmth growing in her chest. "I'm not like you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but you've got something we don't often see in people like you. Honor." Xara's breath caught in her throat. Honor. She had never considered herself to be honorable. She had always been a weapon, a tool to carry out her orders. But now, as she looked at the human leader, she realized that she didn't want to be a weapon anymore. She didn't want to be a tool of destruction. The pod continued its journey toward the human stronghold, the stars outside growing brighter as they approached. But as they drew closer to safety, Xara felt a sense of unease settle over her. This wasn't over. The battle was still ongoing, and she was no longer sure where her loyalties lay. Just as they were about to reach the stronghold, the human leader stopped her. His hand reached out, and for the first time, he looked at her not as an enemy, but as an ally. "You've helped us," he said, his voice softer than before. "You've saved my life. And for that, I'm grateful. But we're not just fighting for our survival anymore. We're fighting for something more, something worth dying for. I want you to know that we're not enemies anymore. We're allies. If you're willing, we'll fight together. You don't have to be an assassin anymore. You can be part of something bigger than yourself. You can fight with us." Xara stared at him, her mind spinning. Could she do it? Could she truly walk away from everything she had known and become something else? Something better? For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure. But she knew one thing. Whatever happened, she had found something worth fighting for. And for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. The final battle was unlike anything Xara had ever seen. The stars above the battlefield glowed with the eerie light of an impending storm. Only this storm wasn't made of clouds. It was made of steel, fire, and hatred. On one side stood the alien overlords, a technologically superior force controlled by a vast eye, an army that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. On the other stood humanity, the underdogs, weak, outnumbered, and outgunned, yet their hearts burned with a fire that no machine or alien could ever comprehend. Xara, the former assassin, stood with them, the same assassin who had once hunted these humans down without hesitation. But now she was part of their fight. She wasn't just watching from the sidelines anymore. She was in the thick of it, fighting alongside the very people she had once seen as weak and insignificant. The battle had already begun before they even landed. The alien overlords, in their arrogance, had underestimated the humans. They had thought that their advanced technology and AI-driven armies would crush the resistance without effort. But what they didn't understand was that humans didn't fight to win. They'd fought for something far more important: survival. Xara had seen it firsthand. She had watched as humans, injured and tired, kept fighting. They didn't run from death. They didn't cower in fear. They stared death in the face and kept moving forward. It was their determination, their resilience, and their loyalty to one another that made them powerful. No matter how advanced the enemy was, they had no chance against the heart of a human. Now, Xara was fighting by their side. She had been trained in stealth, in deception, and in death. But what she didn't know was how to fight for something bigger than herself. She had always fought for a cause, but now she was fighting for people. She was fighting for the future of humanity. The battlefield was a blur of chaos. Explosions rocked the landscape, sending debris flying through the air. The hum of energy weapons and the crackle of fire filled the air as human soldiers fought with everything they had. But it wasn't just their weapons that made them dangerous. It was their will to survive. The human soldiers worked together, helping one another, covering each other's backs. Sarah had never seen anything like it. And then, as the battle raged on, she saw the Eye's leader. It was a towering figure, a massive machine of metal and circuitry. It stood above the battlefield, directing the alien forces with cold precision. This was the heart of the enemy's strength. If they could take it down, the war would be won. But that wasn't going to be easy. The machine was protected by an army of robotic enforcers, each one stronger and more deadly than the last. The humans had no chance of defeating it head-on, but they had something the AI didn't: ingenuity, adaptability, and most importantly, the ability to work together. Zara's heart raced as she surveyed the battlefield. She had been given a mission: to infiltrate the Eye's stronghold and take down its leader. It was a task she had accomplished countless times before, but this time was different. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She wasn't working for the enemy. She was working for the humans, for the survival of the species she had once thought was weak. She activated her cloaking device, disappearing into the shadows. Her movements were fluid, precise, as she made her way toward the Eye's leader. She could hear the sounds of the battle growing louder behind her, the screams of soldiers, the clash of weapons, but she stayed focused. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of the war. As she neared the Eye's leader, Sarah took a deep breath. She had been trained for moments like this. She knew how to move silently, how to strike with deadly precision. But this time, something was different. She wasn't just fighting for a paycheck or for the glory of her superiors. She was fighting for the humans. She was fighting for them all. The leader was standing at the center of a large platform, overseeing the chaos below. His robotic minions surrounded him, but Kshara was able to slip past them unnoticed. She moved quickly, silently, her every step calculated. She reached the base of the platform, and with a quick swipe of her blade, she severed the power supply to the Eye's control center. The platform flickered, the lights dimming for a brief moment. It was enough to draw the leader's attention. The Eye's eyes glowed red as it turned to face her. It was faster than she had anticipated, but Kshara was ready. She engaged her cloaking device again, vanishing from sight, but the AI's sensors were still tracking her. It didn't matter. She had already calculated the next move. With a swift motion, she launched a series of explosive devices that triggered a chain reaction within the AI's system. The leader let out a guttural scream, if a machine could scream, before its lights flickered and went dark. Sarah stood still, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps as she watched the once dominant force of the galaxy collapse in front of her. The battle outside had quieted for a moment, and then the humans erupted in cheers. The AI's hold over the galaxy was broken. The humans had won, but the victory was not without cost. Sarah looked out over the battlefield, her eyes scanning the scene of destruction. The ground was littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, human and alien alike. But despite the death, despite the destruction, there was a sense of hope in the air. The humans had done it. They had defeated the unbeatable enemy. They had overcome the impossible odds. As the human soldiers gathered together, the leader Kshara had once fought to kill stepped forward. His face was bruised, his body battered, but his spirit was unbroken. He walked up to Kshara, a look of gratitude and respect in his eyes. "You did it," he said, his voice hoarse but filled with sincerity. "You helped us win." Kshara nodded, but the weight of the victory still hung heavy on her shoulders. She had fought for something bigger than herself, and she had come to understand the true strength of humanity. It wasn't their technology. It wasn't their weapons. It was their heart. It was their unyielding will to survive, to protect their own, to fight for each other even when all seemed lost. The human leader clapped her on the shoulder, and for the first time, Kara felt like she belonged. She had been an assassin. She had been a weapon, a tool of destruction. But now she was something else. She was a hero. She was a part of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. And as the sun rose over the battlefield, shining down on the survivors, Sarah knew that humanity's fight was far from over. But they had won the most important battle. They had proven to the galaxy that no matter how impossible the odds, they would always rise again. They would never stop fighting. But that wasn't going to be easy. The machine was protected by an army of robotic enforcers, each one stronger and more deadly than the last. The humans had no chance of defeating it head-on. But they had something the AI didn't: ingenuity, adaptability, and most importantly, the ability to work together. Zara's heart raced as she surveyed the battlefield. She had been given a mission: to infiltrate the AI's stronghold and take down its leader. It was a task she had accomplished countless times before, but this time was different. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She wasn't working for the enemy. She was working for the humans, for the survival of the species she had once thought was weak. She activated her cloaking device, disappearing into the shadows. Her movements were fluid, precise, as she made her way toward the AI's leader. She could hear the sounds of the battle growing louder behind her, the screams of soldiers, the clash of weapons, but she stayed focused. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of the war. As she neared the AI's leader, Sarah took a deep breath. She had been trained for moments like this. She knew how to move silently, how to strike with deadly precision. But this time, something was different. She wasn't just fighting for a paycheck or for the glory of her superiors. She was fighting for the humans. She was fighting for them all. The leader was standing at the center of a large platform, overseeing the chaos below. His robotic minions surrounded him, but Kshara was able to slip past them unnoticed. She moved quickly, silently, her every step calculated. She reached the base of the platform, and with a quick swipe of her blade, she severed the power supply to the AI's control center. The platform flickered, the lights dimming for a brief moment. It was enough to draw the leader's attention. The AI's eyes glowed red as it turned to face her. It was faster than she had anticipated, but Kshara was ready. She engaged her cloaking device again, vanishing from sight, but the AI's sensors were still tracking her. It didn't matter. She had already calculated the next move. With a swift motion, she launched a series of explosive devices that triggered a chain reaction within the AI's system. The leader let out a guttural scream, if a machine could scream, before its lights flickered and went dark. Sarah stood still, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps as she watched the once dominant force of the galaxy collapse in front of her. The battle outside had quieted for a moment, and then the humans erupted in cheers. The AI's hold over the galaxy was broken. The humans had won, but the victory was not without cost. Sarah looked out over the battlefield, her eyes scanning the scene of destruction. The ground was littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, human and alien alike. But despite the death, despite the destruction, there was a sense of hope in the air. The humans had done it. They had defeated the unbeatable enemy. They had overcome the impossible odds. As the human soldiers gathered together, the leader Kshara had once fought to kill stepped forward. His face was bruised, his body battered, but his spirit was unbroken. He walked up to Kshara, a look of gratitude and respect in his eyes. "You did it," he said, his voice hoarse but filled with sincerity. "You helped us win." Kshara nodded, but the weight of the victory still hung heavy on her shoulders. She had fought for something bigger than herself, and she had come to understand the true strength of humanity. It wasn't their technology. It wasn't their weapons. It was their heart. It was their unyielding will to survive, to protect their own, to fight for each other even when all seemed lost. The human leader clapped her on the shoulder, and for the first time, Kara felt like she belonged. She had been an assassin. She had been a weapon, a tool of destruction. But now she was something else. She was a hero. She was a part of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. And as the sun rose over the battlefield, shining down on the survivors, Sarah knew that humanity's fight was far from over. But they had won the most important battle. They had proven to the galaxy that no matter how impossible the odds, they would always rise again. They would never stop fighting.